Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this week's podcast. I am really excited with this week's guest, who you'll hear from in a moment. I was at a reunion, a Royal Military Academy Sandhurst reunion of our platoon and the cadets that were trained, and it could have been a dire evening, but for me meeting this guest, who you'll hear from in a minute. What an interesting man he is. He began his life as a Queen's Dragoon Guard officer in the British Army. Then tragically had a major accident, which you'll hear about later, which caused him to have to change career. He's since then done some fascinating work, rubbing shoulders with some of the world's wealthiest and most interesting people and learning from them. And he's also an explorer in his spare time. Without further ado, I'll let him introduce himself.
Thanks, Jonathan. Good morning. Yes, I'm Chris, that's right. I'm a yacht broker. I'll explain more about that in a minute, but yes, I sell very large yachts to interesting people around the planet. And there are some stories I can tell you and some stories I can't tell you, but I look forward to our chat. On this, the Inspiring Leadership podcast, which I've enjoyed watching many episodes of. So without further ado, the Inspiring Leadership podcast hosted by Jonathan Bowman-Perks. Over to you.
Thank you, Chris. And Chris, you've done so many things and you've traveled to so many places. We were just chatting here. You went to Monaco for the Grand Prix, but also, you know, you're meeting so many interesting people. And we have the nice connection with Chris Moon, Manley Hopkinson, and you have this habit of doing crazy things. but having had such a major accident as you did, which I'd like you to talk about as you talk about some of your life, you really have to look after yourself better than you are doing. And I think in one of your recent things, you overtrained and then had to be bedridden for 7 days to recover. So take it easy. It's my request, Chris. But Chris, tell us about currently yacht broking. You know, for those of us who don't know anything about yacht broking, what does it involve? And, you know, what are the interesting sizes of boats and people that you meet?
Wait. Interestingly, a lot of people ask me, what is it about yacht broking? I mean, yacht broking is, the word yacht and the word broking should be disconnected from each other, because in fact, yachting is our product. The yacht, you know, whether it be a holiday, whether it be buying, whether it be building, whether it be being involved in some way in yachting. And then there's brokerage, which is building relationships and offering information and offering detail to clients that otherwise don't have the time to build those relationships themselves. So that's what I do, is I spend all my time building relationships and offering yachts as my product. That's the way I look at it.
And I think that was the thing that struck me. You and I were laughing with each other as we came to the bar after the dinner, that we'd met some interesting people from, you know, I don't know, 35 years before, but they were all talking about themselves at great length and never interested in asking you or I about ourselves. But it's a skill that you clearly have, and you're very comfortable about that, really, to hear people's stories. And you must have met some fascinating people. Is there anything you can tell us about some of the people?
I'm with you, Jonathan. My wife and I often, you know, after a night out, or whether it be for dinner or wherever we might have been, we often say, well, I met this person. It's fascinating. You know, he asked me a lot about myself. Or, you know, so I'm very, very aware that, you know, if you do all the talking, you never do any listening. So I spend all my time doing the listening, you know, and you know, one of the nice things about our business is we don't have a huge volume of clients. We have a very tight group, small group of clients, which means we get to know them extremely well, which means get the opportunity to regularly listen. And the more you listen, the more you learn. And it's quite interesting how relationships develop with much more strength the more you learn about them rather than them learning about you. I can't really explain it. I've always been a listener rather than a talker. And you know, right now I'm with a client of mine who's a fascinating guy, you know, and I can't tell you much more about him other than the fact that, you know, he made his first fortune when he was 16. You know, and literally his schoolmaster said, you must go. You can't stay at school. You haven't been at school for the last 2 years anyway, in your mind. You must go and follow your dream. And he followed his dream, you know, and he had, anyway, it's a fascinating story. But yes, listening to him is, the more I listen, the more I learn.
Yeah, well, we'll stay with this one because obviously protecting, and it is very, you're in a similar profession to me, confidentiality is a key thing.
Yeah.
If people feel you're loose-lipped and you're going to gossip about them, your career's over, really. Trust is a key part of it. But there must be some themes in the most successful people that you've met. And of course, what is success? Is it just lots of money, or is it that balance between wanting what you already have rather than, happiness certainly is a key element of it, wanting what you already have rather than success, getting what you want. But if you were to look, and you've listened and you've learned from a whole variety of people, again, in a small niche, what stands out for you as the kind of qualities of these inspiring leaders for the ones that are? Clearly, you've met one or two who are toxic, but knowing you, Chris, I don't think you tend to do business with those kind of people. You'd walk away from
John,
those.
I mean, I've spent my life, well, my more recent life, the last 30 years, doing business with people who want to do business with me. And in the early days, I didn't choose. If somebody wanted to do business with me, I would tend to do business with them. These days, as time's moved on, I obviously don't have as much time to deal with as many people as I might like to deal with. So I'm able to be a bit more choosy. And I tend to choose who to spend my time with, not based on how much money they're going to spend with me, but with how I feel the chemistry of that relationship developing. So if it's developing well, I know that in the end, something will come my way and I will have done something that I've enjoyed doing. I absolutely never calculate the sum of what the relationship might give in the early days, because you might meet the richest man in the world who thinks he wants to do business with you, and after 6 months of trying, you realize you don't have chemistry. You've given him your entire heart and all the information that you've acquired over all those years, and he says, "Thanks very much, goodbye." Well, that's an utter waste of 6 months of both his time and my time. Whereas equally, meet somebody quite quickly and build chemistry, and before you know it, you're onto projects, yachting. So I do think it's the way that the life has changed for me is the need to do business has been replaced by the want to do business. And then you talked about what is success. Well, interestingly, when I first started in the business, all of my clients were sort of 60 plus. In those days, if you remember, we were using telex and then fax. And then, shortly after that, the email started coming in. And with email and with this quick communication, so people were able to make their fortunes earlier and earlier and earlier. So historically, I think what success meant was amassing a pile of wealth in order that when you hit your retirement, maybe 60, 70 or 80, you're able to enjoy this vast wealth. That was kind of the way that wealth was considered. Doesn't matter whether you were trading in the Caribbean in sugarcane, or whether you were, or these days, whether you're trading in oil, whatever you might have been doing, it took a long time to make your fortune. Now, I have clients less than 30 who have made billions and billions of dollars. And absolutely, their route to happiness is not more billions of dollars. And their route to, and what they consider to be successful, is not more billions of dollars. Again, the client I'm with today, we had dinner last night, and he said, "Well, I'm 44. I really need to get my foot down if I'm going to be successful." Yeah. And I can't tell you much about what we're doing, but we're doing a very, very significant group of boats together. So it's, people rate their success. Where a butcher in our local village would consider himself to be successful. He's been there 30 years and he is the only butcher in the village. So yeah, that has a level of success too. But so it's not just about money. No, 100% it's not just about money. And again, I remember particularly a client of mine who's a very good friend of mine. He'd made a few £billion, and we were sitting somewhere, and he said, "Well, if once I'm able to do that, and this piece of the jigsaw comes together, and then we're able to do this, that, and the other, and once we get there, I think I should probably be okay." Yeah. And this is already when he's absolutely top of the pile in anybody else. So I think we're all driven by different things, but just simple money, it's not it.
No, it is so very interesting that often there's when I when I get here, then I'll be happy. When I do this, then I'll be happy. And you and I were talking before we started this recording about my trip to Peru and doing various plant-based medicine ceremonies to think about my life and my purpose and that kind of stuff. And it did give me lots of time, the 10, 11 days in Peru, about what really, really matters. And for me, it is my wife, Lee, my 4 children, 2 of my own, 2 of my stepchildren, my brother who's alive, and survived a dreadful attack, a knife attack on him and his family, and good friends and clients I choose to work with. And I'm lucky like you. I think in my early days, yes, I was scrabbling around. I hate to even use the word, but probably prostituting myself somewhat, going, yes, I'll do that. I can do anything, whatever you want. Now I sort of know when I'm not the right person for someone. I go, this is not for me. Let me find someone who is, because this is not the kind of thing I do. Exactly. So I think as we get older, we start to realize what we do like and can do and are good at, and what we're not good at. And someone said to me, you should have a stop doing list to stop doing list and a get to do list, because you were talking about need to, want to, but also get to. You get to meet some fascinating people, develop relationships with them over a long period of time, where you are, and this is the link actually between what you do and what I do. We are both trusted advisors to senior leaders. In my case, CEOs about leadership. In your case, it's very successful, wealthy individuals about the kind of yachts that they want and the kind of life experience they want to have. But I found in our conversation with you, which is why I wanted you on the podcast, I so enjoyed our conversation, and it could range over a wide swath of topics. And you had a view, you had some experience. I mean, let's just take you even back to understand, how have you accumulated all this experience that allows you to make a connection with people who just haven't got the time to talk to many people, because they just find that don't bother me, don't suck up to me just because I'm wealthy. I want a real, genuine, trusted relationship with you, so that when I'm ready, if you're the right person, you got the right product, I will buy from you because I trust you. Yeah. So take me right back to early childhood upbringing. What shaped you, Chris? Just help us a bit with a bit of a story.
Goodness me. I'll answer the question. I'll take you back to the childhood. But the thing that I know for sure, and I don't know a lot of things for sure, but the thing that I do know for sure is that the people that I deal yachts for have got all sorts of advisors around the planet that help them with all sorts of things. It doesn't matter whether it's a chef or whether it's a stockbroker or whether it's a banker or a lawyer. They've got lots of people that help them with their decisions that they make. But I do know that the successful people I deal with are good at making decisions. And if they have the right information, almost always they make the right decision. I mean, our path has always got a left or a right, wherever you go. And they regularly make the right decision, but you can't make the right decision without good information. So I've spent my business life making sure I have the right and relevant information for this very small niche of piece of business that I know everything about. So if you had your head down making widgets for 30 years, and you decided that the thing to do is to spend 5 or 6 years enjoying the sea and the privacy with your family and your growing family or your friends, whoever it may be, in order to make a decision about what you need, when you need it, how much you should be paying for it, how much it's going to cost you to run, you need to have somebody advise you. And, because you can't possibly have all the information that I've acquired over 30 years. So what I try and do is package the information quickly and efficiently in a trustworthy way and deliver it to you, the guy that needs it. There's no magic to that. That's just hard work, knowing the market and being reliable. And that's what that is.
Yeah, and just stay with that for a minute, Chris, because you said there's no magic to that. I don't quite fully buy that. What it is that's almost a bit of the science of the requirement of your profession. But then comes the art, which is the emotional and social intelligence, the curiosity, the authenticity, the vulnerability, because only the strong can be vulnerable, to open up and build a relationship where they really connect with you and they trust you, because yes, you have the information, but also they enjoy your company, because they're going to spend a lot of time with you, aren't they? You know, they're going to be on boats. They're going to spend a lot of time with you.
This is the chemistry thing that I talked about. I mean, there's no point in trying to force chemistry. No. And that's why in my very little business, I try and be sure that whenever we take on anybody new, they're not just a clone of me or somebody else in the business, because, you know, I can deal with the people I have chemistry with. I need somebody that's going to have chemistry with a different group of people. And we know that works. And if you don't have chemistry with me and you would like to deal with my business, maybe you'd like to talk to Henry or Matt or Ross or Lucinda or whoever it might be. You know, so I think it's a very relevant point. It can't be all things to all people, but we build that it's all about that the chemistry to start with. And once you have that chemistry, of course, then you need to back it up with the detailed knowledge, that information that helps these people, man or woman, to make a decision. You know, there's a very, very big increase in the number of ladies that are buying and building big yachts these days. Independent women that have been astonishingly successful and wonderfully insightful and building big yachts, which is exciting. Yeah.
So take us now back to childhood. Who was it? What events? Five events, 5 people maybe, that have shaped the skill you have to connect authentically with people, to be genuinely interested in the other, not just about you and me, because that's not what I connected with you. I just connected with you because you are very worldly. You're an old soul in a young body. You've done a lot already. So what was it you've done that shaped you?
You know, Jonathan, I know that you have a very wide readership or listenership, however you do with the podcast viewers. You know, I had a privileged background, but I think probably quite a tough upbringing. Failed marriage, my parents, the death of my older brother in a car crash, the death of various brothers through cancer and that sort of thing. I've had all sorts of things have happened over my younger life, and I have learned that. Technically, I've learned and understood through various courses I've been on that actually successful people, not that I had put myself in the category, but the people that I deal with who are ultimately very successful, often have trauma in their history, and the trauma has led me to always be looking for a father figure, interestingly. So I'm very good at selling to slightly older men than me, and that's because I strive for that relationship, and I really enjoy being listened to by my superiors. I really enjoy delivering them something that they need, and I enjoy being needed by them. And that's something, you know, it's not about the deal, it's not about the money, it's about that relationship. And I deliver stuff that they want and they thank me for it. And that is that's the bottom line.
Wow. Now we found many connections. That's really eerie. I mean, not only I'm really sorry about the death of your brothers through the car crash and cancer and the failed marriage, but in your case, looking for the father figure, that's exactly the therapist would say with me. My father was killed when I was 2.5, fast jet pilot, saving the life of other people, but I was looking for these kind of characters. So with people like Richard Dannett, General Lord Dannett, I found a father figure that I admired. With certain other generals who will remain nameless because it'd be unfair to name them, I found pretty toxic characters that I went, whoa, what? I thought you were going to be something special and you're not. So it is interesting that wish for both of us to make connections with people. Is it partly looking for a connection that we missed when we were younger? And I found this with, and I don't know whether you've seen this with your very wealthy, successful clients, but with my successful clients, a number of them lost a parent figure or that the marriage broke up, so that wasn't around, and it drives them. Often, in some ways, the happiest people don't actually achieve awful, amazing things, because they're happy and they're contented, and they'll just muddle along, and this is just fine. Looking after the butcher shop.
Well, it goes back to being, what is success? And if success is the accumulation of vast wealth, then, that is one measure of success. But I think we all know that there are a good handful of people that have this incredible financial success that you wouldn't necessarily consider to be happy, in the words, whereas, as I say, if you go back to the butcher in Milford, he's a happy man, and he's fulfilling his dream, and he's having a good time. So success is different for everybody. The people who I know that have made lots and lots of money measure their success against lots of different bars than I think we would find. We would necessarily think. So, for example, time spent with family. We all think that's very important. But a lot of my friends who've got lots of money, their families are so tight. They're much tighter than certainly my family is. I love that. I love being involved in those circumstances where they've got all their grown-up children around them, all their grandchildren around them, and all their, they keep everybody really tight, and they're unbreakable.
Because when you go home, you're going to go and make up to your wife that it's now your 19th wedding anniversary today.
It is today,
and you're away from home, and you're going to have to go back and celebrate. With the different life experiences you've had, what got you to go and become a cavalry officer in the British Army? Because the cavalry and guards, have a reputation, a stereotype of wealth, opulence, and a little bit of arrogance. Now, you don't have that arrogance, which is so nice, but I know one or two who look down on other people. But you're the kind of person that can talk with kings and walk with a common man. How did you learn that? Who taught you that?
Goodness me, you're very flattering, Jonathan. I very, very quickly, here I am on a podcast talking about myself. It's not that comfortable for me, but historically, I was brought up in Birmingham. My parents were barristers. They were on the Birmingham circuit. My stepfather came along when I was 7. Very interesting man. Been up the beach to Normandy in his tank. Never really talked about it. He'd worked in Africa. He'd done all sorts of interesting jobs in the army, and then he came out and went to Cambridge and became a barrister. And he came into my life when he was around 60. And I think it was literally just his stories that encouraged me to join the army. He sent me to rugby, and paid for me to be there, I think, and then organised a little bit of an introduction to the army, but nothing strong. And it was just his inspiration that led me to pursue the army. When I got to Sandhurst, I literally had no idea the difference between a sergeant and a colour sergeant, or I hardly knew anything about the army, really. And it wasn't until I met my next door neighbour, Charlie Craven, who's still one of my greatest friends. And he said, "Well, what on earth are you doing joining an infantry regiment when you're plainly a cavalry soldier?" So, well, okay. So the two of us went off and I did a course. Well, not a course. What was it? You went off as a junior officer to go and visit their regiment, and I had such a lovely time at QDG. I thought, well, that's it. And they accepted me, and the rest is history. And I had a lovely time, and it was a great fit. And I did my 3 years, and I would have stayed longer. In fact, I was re-rolling to the Army Air Corps because I quite fancied being an Apache pilot. But that's when I broke my back and had to leave. And
what did you? I mean, I'll be interested to hear how Charlie's doing these days, because I do remember Charlie Craven. He was really quite a character, stood out.
He's a lovely man,
among the group, and love to catch up with him. Not that I knew him well, but just I liked him.
He's actually, interestingly about Charlie, he's been running all sorts since he left the army. I think he did 30 years, and then he came out, and now he's been running Prince Charles's estate in Gloucestershire, which has been great. I think he's just retiring from that because his wife is a very successful barrister. So he's another guy, he's a round peg, round hole, very happy, but doesn't have a huge amount of money, and he's very, very happy.
Yeah, for me, that's success. happiness is success, wanting what you already have. And we both come across people who have oodles of wealth, but they're not necessarily happy. Some who do have a lot of wealth and are happy.
They absolutely are.
It isn't binary. It's a very complicated equation, and it's often attitude defines your altitude. But what was it that happened that caused you to break your back? Can you just take us briefly through the story, because it was
lack of any sense. As a 20-year-old officer in the army, no clue really. And I was, in fact, I think I was going off to be in the regimental ski team. I'd done it for a couple of seasons by then, and I was already quite keen on doing other things as well as skiing when I was in the mountains. So I learned how to paraglide. And on this particular day, we were in Germany, very, very flat, but it was a bit windy, and I went and tied myself behind a car and took off and landed in a heap and burst 4 vertebrae. Lucky to live, and then even luckier to be able to walk. So and that was the Germans down at the Werner Vicker clinic that put it all together and stapled all my back together and sent me home. But that was the moment that I left the officers' mess to go paragliding, and I never rejoined the army. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, that is a monumental event in your life. I would often ask people about their proudest and darkest moments. I imagine associated with that, Chris, there's some pretty dark moments when you thought, what the hell's happened to my life? Where am I going to go? What am I going to do? Would you perhaps share a bit of those dark
moments? I would say that was, I did read that was a pretty dark moment in my life. I mean, as I say, I was lucky to survive and even luckier to walk. So there was a big silver lining there, really. But I had been, young, fit cavalry officer. I had got my joining instructions for my Apache course at Middle Wallop, and there was a 6-month gap between when I could leave my regiment when I started at Middle Wallop. So during that time, I was meant to do the Army ski team, and then I was going to Croatia to go and captain one of the Nick 55s and take boys from on R&R. So I had a lovely winter and summer planned ahead, and then off to be a helicopter pilot. And in a blink of an eye, it was over. And I was in a hospital bed in Germany, and then flown back to England and, recuperating for a year and finding myself in a suit every day rather than my combats, which was pretty disappointing. But anyway, it was a turning point in life. But yeah, that was a pretty dark few weeks, I would say, probably.
I'm sure, and I just can't imagine what it's like and what you've been through. I myself last year ended up in A&E and in hospital for a period of time in intense, agonizing pain because of some operation that had gone wrong. And I just thought, people like yourself or Chris Moon, who's had some terrible events. I mean, you worry about, breaking your back and 5 of the vertebrae stapled together. But Chris, who's been on this podcast, got blown up, lost a leg and an arm, and still does sort of Marathon des Sables and does.
We ran in the London Marathon together last year. In fact,
I think you did. Yeah. How did you get on?
Yeah, well, he did brilliantly. I didn't see a lot of him on the, he's say himself, he's not the fastest these days. But the fact that he can even contemplate it, let alone complete it, is astonishing.
Yeah. He is an inspiration. And also you got another mutual friend, Manley Hopkinson, ex-naval officer. And was it with Manley and Chris that you did your exploring, or was it with other people?
No, it wasn't actually. It was with a client that became a friend, who's now become a very good friend, and somebody with whom share a lot of chemistry. And he likes and respects my knowledge. I give him the information he needs. He makes his decisions, and we do lots of yachting business together. So it's a mutually, agreeable arrangement in every respect. And I've and a very warm man, somebody who is extremely happy with his wealth, somebody who does keep his family close to him, somebody who is an incredible leader. If he'd been in the army, he would definitely have been the chief. If he'd been in the politician, he'd definitely been prime minister. He's one of those characters. And here I am, little me in his life, and it's wonderful. So I've done those things with him.
What did you do? What did you do? Tell us where you went.
Well, we've done many things. We've ridden around Africa on motorbikes, top to bottom South America on motorbikes. We've done lots of heli skiing together. We've done marathons across Namibia, so 7 marathons in 7 days. We've done mountain bike trips all over the planet. We've walked to both the North and South Pole together. We've done, I mean, we just, you know, we've just had a wonderful time. It's been one of those, I mean, obviously, probably my most meaningful client-friend relationship in my career.
Yeah. And I love the fact that you were saying, I'm not sure I should be on this podcast. And you just reeled off some amazing things that you've done, which I can only but dream of. And you've done them and you keep doing them, even though at times you end up overdoing it.
It's opportunity, Jonathan. That's all it is. It's not through any great desire. It's just opportunity. When your friend says to you, hey, come on, Chris, let's walk to the North Pole. How could you possibly say, nah, it's not for me, I'm busy. I mean, that's the sort of opportunity you just have to take. And the only difficulty is my 10-year-old son is making hints that he might like one day to walk to the South Pole. So
yeah.
I swore I'd never go and do a cold expedition again. Only hot ones.
Okay.
If he wants to do it, I might actually have to go and do it again.
I think you will. With your stepfather who inspired you for his stories of D-Day and the beaches of Normandy. I remember thinking about D-Day when I was ADC to Field Marshal the Lord Inge. We went to D-Day for the reunion of the Green Hards, and we had Sergeant Major Stanley Hollis, VC, who was the only person to get a VC on D-Day. And he reminds me of you in that he was wonderfully modest. And so I said to him, I said, what happened? I said, you know, the story says you stormed this machine gun nest with a Spandau in, having seen your company commander be killed, and you were the company sergeant major at the time. You know, what happened? He said, yeah. He said, we were being pinned down as we were coming up this hill in the Green House, now the Yorkshire Regiment. And he said, and I remember telling my soldiers that they must make sure as we left Portsmouth that the left pouch was for the Bren gun magazines and the right pouch was for grenades. And get those bloody socks out of there, the spare socks, get them out of there. They're for these things. He said, and there I was crawling up towards this position. I had my Bren gun, which sadly had belonged to the company commander, but he was dead. And he said, so I reached in for my grenades and I pulled out a spare pair of socks. I said, you bloody hypocrite, Sergeant Major. You know, here you are telling the boys, and you got spare socks in you where you should have a grenade. Which would you do with it now? So he said, so I shoved a rock in it. And I said, grenade! And I threw my socks at the Germans and they ducked in the bunker and I ran in and I shot them all. I mean, just and he got a Victoria Cross. Great. But I'm sure, I don't know whether he made the story. I don't think he did. But some of these moments, like talking to General John Kisley and Guardsman Galloway, who I did the Cyprus Double Mountain Marathon with, and Galloway and he had run out of bullets. And, you know, they said, are you with me? The company. And he was calling the company's name. And the voice came, I am with you, sir. And it was Galloway. And he said, are you with me? Left flank. I'm with you, sir. Let's just go. And the two of them went over the top just on their own. And just moments of bravery. Going back to your childhood, 16, Chris Cecil Wright, age 16. Now you got a son who's 10. When he's 16, what bit of advice would you give him, which you would have given yourself about, don't worry about this, but this does matter? What bit of advice?
You know, I think that's what would I do every day, try and offer him advice. I think the difficulty is at 16, whether you listen to the advice or not is the thing. We all get lots and lots of advice. You ask me what advice I would give. I would say, you know, listen to the advice that you're given, you know, because I'm sure I was told as a child, you don't be worried about failure. But I didn't learn that until I was in my mid-30s. When in fact, you know, you have to fail to succeed. You can't possibly understand or believe that you're actually succeeding until you know what failure looks like. It's impossible. It doesn't make any sense. So I would say to Sam, you know, listen to the advice that you're given by people you respect. Don't, you know, don't always think you're right, which is what 16-year-old boys tend to think. I know I certainly did.
Yeah, no, it's a really good one. And we'll just go around the Inspiring Leadership Compass. I mean, compasses and maps have been a key part of your exploring and your day as a young officer in the QDG, leading the tanks in the right direction, rather than, as I did, leading them into a farm barnyard where we had to reverse out.
I got lost as well.
Nothing more dangerous to NATO than a British Army officer with a map, I think my sergeant used to say. So the first one is true north, your moral integrity, your values, your beliefs. What would be a couple of your top values that you've lived your life by, and what have you done when you let them slip, and how did you get it back and regain your composure?
There's loads of different words to describe who we all like to think we are. I like to think I have very strict integrity. I like to think I'm entirely honorable. I like to think all of those good words about myself. But I happen to know, when I'm staring the enemy in the eye and I'm talking about my counterparts in the yachting world, on occasion I have let that slip, which I'm humiliated to admit, but I've admitted to myself and I've put right in subsequent years. So I think, with the intention to live with utter decency, it's most demoralizing when you feel there was a way that you could have handled something differently. And I'm trying not to be too deep about it, but the fact is, I like to think that I'm the most straightforward and honest person there is, but I tend to try and do anything to make a deal. I sort of almost can't help myself. These days, I help myself a lot better by standing by my principles. But in the past, maybe they slipped occasionally. Yeah, and I think this is the thing. I think back to my days in the army, where in my desire to succeed and get promoted, I would really, try and do almost anything. And I'm ashamed to look back on that kind of behavior and that raw aggression and ambition, and just like the others must have looked at me and thought, what an idiot, but so yeah, it's like too soon old, too late smart. And you look back years later and you think, if I knowing what I know now at 60, I could have been such a better officer when I was a young man. If only I'd taken the advice. But then you wouldn't have been a young officer.
This is true. This is very true. So from your integrity and your values to the next one round, PQ, which is your meaning and purpose. You've traveled so much, you've explored, you've met so many fascinating people. You have a business which is about relationships, and it's about the sea and yachts and the like. What gives your life meaning and purpose, your calling, your vocation? What is it?
I suppose, like a lot of people in business, from the moment you set off in business, you're always looking to be, the most financially successful, because that's the yardstick by which we measure success in business. So I've always wanted to be financially successful. Now I have that element of sort of financial security. It no longer holds the sort of the meaning that it did, and therefore I could hang up my boots today and sail off into the sunset and do something else. But what keeps me doing it is the purpose that you're talking about, which is, it is my identity. It's what I am. It's what I like doing. It's what I know most about. It's where I add most value to other people's lives in the business sense. And it gives me, it gets me, gets me up in the morning, and I enjoy it. I enjoy the interaction with these people. And if I didn't do what I did, if I didn't have this little gem of information which I offer to people, then the people that I deal with would literally have no reason to talk to me, and my life would be less rich. So that's kind of from a business sense. I mean, putting my family and my children aside for one moment, that's what gets me up in the business world.
And I think it is an interesting one about when you have a life that's full of meaning and purpose, and I'm very fortunate to have that. That retirement, I think, is an outdated mode in our current era. because you want to have a way of life so your health span matches your lifespan. And as we'll come on to next, health, brain health and physical health, it's really important when you're doing meaningful work. And so if you, Chris, Cecil Wright, can be doing this in later life, you know, when you're in your 60s, like I am now, or your 70s, and still be of value to clients, it's a wonderful way of life if it can include the family and friends and other things. So it becomes not a job, but actually a calling, which is when you've really.
It is interesting. I mean, because obviously you know, life moves in phases, and my early phase in business was entirely business, and then my wife came along, and then our 3 children came along, and life focused on them and their early years, you know, very considerably. And actually, I would say that my business knowledge dropped off in those years. But now, as they're growing up and they're spending more time away from home, I'm finding myself re-engaging with the business on a level that I hadn't expected. That if it wasn't there, I think would leave quite a hole. So I'm nurturing that you know, these later days. So I'm really enjoying it again.
Yes, yeah, I sense that. And we talked about health, which is the next component going round the 8 points of the compass, which is health quotient, mental and physical. What would be your top tip on mental brain health and then on physical health? Because clearly you have to look after both in a big way to keep doing what you're doing with your back injury.
I think, I mean, physical health, literally I'll talk to you forever on physical health. Spend a lot of time analysing and trying to be physically healthy. But mental health is the absolute key to me. And I've done a bit of mental health work. And I would say to anybody who hasn't, to discover ways of looking after your mental health is a real light bulb moment. And for me, it came when I was introduced to the Huisman process, which we talked about before. And you know, I wrote the joining instructions 3 times. They take 8 hours to fill out, and on each occasion I just threw them in the bin. But a couple of years after I was introduced to the process, I actually ended up going to do it. And as I say, the light bulb moment was realizing that I had something to gain from it, not actually doing it. You know, it was the understanding that you can benefit from it, that you might have ways of developing your mental health situation to be beneficial for you. Not putting that very well, but just the realization that we can all do with mental health care in some way. That was the thing. That was the light bulb moment for me. Was learning that, you know, it's okay to need help.
Yeah, and I was very inspired by you when you talked about the Huisman process, because it's come to me from so many different directions. Another CEO I was just coaching the other day, or I think he's the senior partner in a venture capital firm, and he said he did it. It was amazing, and his person was from Spain, and I went, great, because up to now the only way I could do the Huisman process is fly to America, where it's run in America. But I think there's this lady who does it in Spain, and I'm just trying to track her down.
Yeah, well, there are various places you can do it. You can do it in the UK as well.
Okay.
It's a charity organisation. I chose to do it in the Napa Valley, because it was the original one, and where Bob Hoffman actually, you know, put the course together. That was one reason. The second reason was I thought it was most likely that I would definitely not come into contact with anybody from my real life, and I was right. And I found it an extremely useful course. I mean, goodness me, we don't have time to talk about the Huisman process on here, but I mean, honestly, it was a life-changing course. And I would say that anybody who has interest in a mental health awareness, you know, just to buy Bob Hoffman's book, you know, called The Huisman Process, is a really great start, and explains the negative love syndrome, which is all to do with trauma in early life, and how it leads us to behave in the way that we behave, and how you tend to push the people you love away from you. And, you know, the extraordinary experience. But, you know, literally 7 days, you come out entirely nourished and refreshed. And, you know, if you have the courage to stick to it, then it changes everything.
Yeah, no, I definitely will. And I'd love Lee to do it as well. But of course, you don't go as a couple. You've got to go on your own. And the other,
I mean, Bob Hoffman was asked, I said, who's this course most suitable for? He said, oh, well, anybody with a mum and dad. So, there's something for everybody.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful. Which takes me on nicely. I mentioned before, it was the thing that stood out among your many qualities was your emotional and social intelligence, which is the next component, EQ. How have you learned to read yourself and manage yourself, to read other people and manage them, and to read the environment, those three elements that make up emotional?
I don't think, well, personally, I don't think you learn those things. I think you gain them out of necessity. And if I go back to what we were talking about before, the necessity for me was to be liked and valued and by my superiors, certainly my father figure. It's something that I didn't feel I had growing up. I was sent away to school, and I just really didn't feel like I was valued by anybody. So this need to be valued, by necessity, you learn to read what people value in you. I think I find it very difficult to answer that question any other way. I think it's a need rather than a learned.
Yeah. But what I have found, which is so encouraging, is with the leaders I've worked with around the world, that it's like a language. You can learn the skills of emotional and social intelligence. And there's some people who are very technically skilled, but almost on the autism spectrum of their lack of awareness of other people, or they might be autistic themselves, where they can learn in certain ways, certain routines, which are a bit rote, but that's their way of learning. I must remember when I come in, I'll ask the secretary, how was your weekend? And I won't walk off as she's replying. I will stay and listen to her. Now, for them, that's harder because they just don't get it innately, but you would come in and chat to her.
No, I'm afraid, Jonathan, I agree with you. I mean, it's like sales. You can learn technique. And I'm sure people can improve themselves by learning technique, but certainly from my perspective, it's not a learned thing. I'll give you an example. I mean, Kitty once said to me, oh, I didn't know you were seeing Bill today. And I said, well, how on earth do you know I'm seeing Bill? She said, well, you're putting your Swatch watch on. It's like, oh, well, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't dream of going to see my client Bill with anything other than an open neck shirt, a cheap watch, and a pair of sneakers, because that's Bill. And I want to be more like Bill when I see Bill, because you like people that are like yourself, sort of thing. Yeah. I can't help myself. Here I am with a German client of mine who is, he spends his entire life in a Savile Row suit. Well, how could I possibly show up in a t-shirt and jeans today? I just couldn't, and I end up being in a suit which I never wear. Yeah. So I think it's this sort of natural way we morph into being the people that we, you know what it's like when you're with your friend. One guy's a sports guy, one guy's a theologist, and you just morph into that person when you're with them. That's the way I feel.
But that's so fascinating for me, how you've learned to adapt and morph and read people and the situation.
It wasn't learned, Jonathan. It wasn't learned. It just happens. This is why I say, Kitty, I had no idea that I was putting on an open neck shirt and a Swatch watch for any other reason than that. It was just in my mind. I was off to see Bill, and that was it. I didn't think to myself, that's what I've got to do. I just do it. That's the thing.
And I think you're someone who seizes opportunities, and you're an early adopter. So you without realizing what you're doing, you're reading the environment, and it's all 89 billion neurons up here, 40,000 around the heart, and 100 million in the gut. These are sending more signals to the brain, these mini brains, than the brain sends back down to them. So you're often picking things up at a gut level. It just feels right.
Well, I think that's right. I once did, when I used to work at my last business, so I was a partner for 20 years, and a lovely business it is, and we had a lot of fun, but went off to do my own thing for my own various reasons. But when I was there, I found myself a bit more of a management and leadership role, and we decided that it would be sensible to give people formal sales training. And we went along, and I sat down and I did 2 days listening to this guy. He was obviously a phenomenal coach and knew all about sales. And all I did was learn why I was a good salesman, not how to be a better one. He just sort of broke down all the things and he gave some examples which seemed really, really obvious to me. But he said, so there you are standing there on the dock waiting for a client to show up, that you're going to show around a boat and you're going to talk to him about a deal. And he drives down the dock in a black Ferrari, stops abruptly, hops out in his black suit and marches towards you. Are you going to ask him how his weekend was? Are you going to ask him, whether he's had a nice lunch that day? No, you're going to certainly after, you're going to talk about numbers instantly. That's all he's interested in. But equally, standing on the dock and there's a nice sort of, I don't know, elderly gentleman with long grey hair, and he's got his wife with a lovely sun hat, and they're gently strolling down towards the dock, and they're stopping and looking at the boat on this side and a nice bougainvillea on this side, and they get to you and they go, oh, hello, how nice to see you. Are you going to welcome on board the boat and get straight down to the numbers? I mean, you're not. And I don't think that it takes great emotional intelligence to see those two extreme examples, but there's lots in between there. That's the.
Well, what you're talking about was going to be my next question, which was the components of cultural intelligence, picking up difference and variety in people, and diversity, equality, inclusion, how you read people from different countries, different backgrounds, different social economic backgrounds, sexual orientation, whatever it is. What's been a top tip that you'd share about how you read differences and make people feel included?
Well, if I'm ultimately honest with you, Jonathan, well, I need to be, is that I'm not great at that. And I recognize that I'm not great at it. And I go back to my chemistry thing, and I would find it very difficult to have chemistry with a Saudi Arabian sheikh. Yeah. I don't know or have any understanding of their culture. I find it extremely difficult, but I know lots of people who are very good with Saudi Arabian sheikhs, and I would gently ease my Saudi Arabian contact in that direction. So I wouldn't hope to be able to just understand and cope with all these different environments. I know where the chemistry lies. I know where kind of some pitfalls are. I know with some, I have no problem with sexuality. I have no problem with color and race. I'm not no bigot in any way. I just know where I add value with chemistry, and it probably isn't very diverse culture away from white English middle class fellow that did a bit of army and now sells boats. That's
no, and that's fine. And in some ways, I can see this as a sort of this camaraderie and connection and trust, almost an extension of the trust and the fun you had as a young officer in the officers' mess. And the trust and the bond you had with those people. You're trying to establish a trust and a bond with people who feel that you get them.
Exactly.
This person gets me.
Entirely false for me to try and, to try and insist that I could build that relationship with, a 25-year-old sheikh. I mean, entirely false.
Yeah. No, that's fair. And resilience is the next one round. And that's something you've had to show in spades, not only in recovering from the hang gliding accident when your back was shattered and broken and rebuilt and pinned, but also when you've had sales deals that you thought we're there, we're going to make this. This is the biggest deal ever, and then bam, it falls through. It doesn't work out. Or you're on one of your expedition doing a number of 7 marathons in Namibia, and you're thinking, I just need a break, but I've got to keep going. So what's your top tip that allows you to be resilient and keep going through adversity?
I mean, it's simple. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. It's as literally as simple as that. Certainly with the deal aspect, that's the thing I find hardest. I mean, it used to make me literally and physically sick. I used to have to go to the loo and dry retch when I heard about a deal that happened that I wasn't involved in, that I knew I could have done. It used to, the anxiety used to eat me up. And still these days, here I am, 52. I signed a very big deal fairly recently, in fact, two very big deals recently, both have been fallen out of bed after we were literally ready to sign the agreement. Deposits have been paid. Big deals for my little tiny business fall out of bed. Years of work, in some cases, many years of work. In other cases, just a year of work. And it's very demoralizing. But again, at least I was in it. At least I was the guy there signing that agreement. The decision to not go ahead with it is their own business decision that I was talking about earlier. And it's not about me, it's about them. So that resilience to keep going, to not break the relationship, just to keep going and trying to deliver what your clients want. That's one bit of.
I think that's so well brought up, and I'd say, Chris, that this is when my Stoic philosophy and training comes in, where the only thing I can control is my own thoughts,
yes,
my own actions. I can't control you, Chris, and what you do and how we are. So I think controlling the controllables is key. We're in the last few minutes. Brand, have you recently ever had 360 feedback from anybody, any external coach or person saying this is what 20 people have given you feedback on, and this is what they love and this is what you could develop? Have you done that?
Been about my business, they've looked into my business and they've decided, so you're talking about feedback against on my brand.
Feedback on you, Chris, how
Yes.
you as a leader and a businessman could be even more successful with your clients.
To be honest, I in ways I haven't done it very formally. I had a company come and look at how we might just tweak the way that we look to the outside world. I mean, it's never been a big thing in my life, is the idea of having a brand, because I try and be who I say I am, but the question is getting that message out to people that don't otherwise know you. A very long way around saying, yes, I have spoken to people. We're a very simple business.
Yeah.
We sell relationships about yachts, and that's what we do. So I have had a bit of help. Maybe I could do with some more. But yeah, no, I have had some help.
It's always so very interesting. I'm constantly interested in 360 myself. Is how I'm coming across, how people are experiencing me, or is there a disconnect between how I see myself on these components and how others do? Legacy. What would you like your legacy to be in your personal life and in your yacht broking work?
Goodness me, my legacy. I haven't thought too much about my legacy. I've without sounding arrogant, I've surpassed any view I might have had about myself when I was a child or in my teens or my early 20s. I had no idea I would possibly have somebody working for me, let alone a team, let alone a business, let alone doing what I'm doing. I had no idea that might happen. And therefore I really haven't given too much thought to legacy. I know that when I do a piece of building, whether I build a house or I build a boat or whatever I do, I put my all into it. And I quite enjoy the fact that house or apartment block or hotel or whatever it is, pub, whatever I've been working on, will be around for a very much longer time than I will be. But I think my legacy will be my children. That's the key for me.
Yeah, I think so. And I recently had my 60th, which was wonderful. And I think one of my proudest moments was my wife very kindly speaking about me in my life, and then my two daughters who did a double act, sharing stories about their dad. And that really, the combination of Lee and then Harriet and Brady brought tears to my eyes. And I think that's your legacy, isn't it? It is.
Certainly, yeah.
It's your partner.
I find
it's your children.
Constantly, daily, hour by hour, astonished how these three human beings have come from being kids. I'm always amazed by it. I mean, they're absolutely.
And this is about to stewardship and legacy. You don't own them. You're looking after them as they pass through your life, and you launch them. I mean, our 4 children have now been launched. They've got their partners. One's got married, another one's getting married this year, another one's getting married next year, and then the 4th may do if they want, or whatever they decide to do. And we're now grandparents, and it's a very special time of life.
Yeah.
And that's your legacy. That's your legacy. You've worked with teams throughout life, executive teams. You've now got teams, you've got your own business. What's your top tip when you've got somebody who's gone toxic or a team that's gone toxic? How do you make it high performing again? What have you found works?
I tell you what, the thing that I've learned, certainly, all these lessons are kind of small scale. I run a very small business. The previous business was slightly bigger than 200 people, and now we're more like 15 people. The thing that I've learned is to know where your strengths and weaknesses lie. And although I've been through the army, and although I do what I do, I'm not a business leader. I'm a salesman, and I know that that's my strength. So actually, one of my most recent, I would say, achievements is to encourage a great friend of mine, Ed Carell, who's got a very long-standing history of success in the banking world, to come and give me his management time in the business. So now I have a proper business manager running the business from a business perspective, and I now just look after sales. So he was ex-military himself, 17th, 21st, and he is a great leader, and he's great at running teams. So I recognize that that's not my great strength. Much better to hire somebody whose great strength it is, and respond to them, and that's what I do.
Yeah, very wise. Penultimate question, a book that you would recommend, maybe on leadership, might be an autobiography or something that you found recently. This is a good read, and why is it a good read? Which one would you recommend?
Goodness, I mean, I read a lot of trash, Jonathan. I do read a lot of trash, but I have a great friend of mine, Bill, in the States, who's is a fascinating man, multi-billionaire, very financially successful. And whenever I see him, I ask him what he's reading, and whatever he's reading, I buy on the spot. So it's back on my bedside table when I arrive home. And one of the most recent books that he suggested to me was a book called Black Box Thinking.
Yes,
which
yes.
is an astonishingly simple idea, but it draws a parallel between the medical industry and the airline industry, and how you can't possibly be right until you're wrong. And the airline industry, of course, there's a problem with an airliner. All airliners are grounded until they find out what the problem is. In the medical industry, everything is brushed under the carpet. And I'm sorry to all the medical people that might be listening, but there's a lot to learn from the airline industry about learning that you can't be right until you know you're wrong.
Yeah. Wow.
So Black Box Thinking is a really fantastic book. And then, of course, the Hoffman Process. It's a must read. I give it to my friends. Probably, I would say I probably bought 200 copies of that book. Wow. And I give them out boringly regularly.
That's amazing.
So I would strongly recommend anybody read that book.
And I hope Bob Hoffman's done an audio version of that, because as dyslexic, for me, that would be a great way of listening.
Well, it would be good. I mean, Bob's no longer with us, but I would hope that there would be an audio book.
I'll be looking for it. Chris, thank you for that. So on the final 2-minute top tip, if you just kindly now for this part, just introduce yourself, tell people what you do, and then share what your top leadership tip is, and then we'll wrap up and I'll chat to you after we finish recording.
Okay. I'm Chris Cecil Wright. I'm a yacht broker. I sell big yachts to interesting people. And I would say my top tip is to listen to the people you respect and take their advice. Don't just listen to their advice, take their advice. Too many times I've listened to my clients who are immensely successful and immensely good at what they do. And I've tried to back up their advice by talking to somebody lesser, and then made the decision not to take their advice. And it's always wrong. So I would say, take the advice from the learned people that you know. Yeah,
very wise advice. Chris Cecil Wright, thank you very much indeed for being on the Inspire Leadership podcast. It's a real pleasure. And you're a fascinating man. And please carry on being you, and good luck with your business. Thank you, Chris.
You're very kind, Jonathan. Thanks very much. I've enjoyed it enormously.